All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to get us started off today by talking about the ecological and social impacts of a double-crested cormorant colony in Woodard Bay, Washington. There we go. So what is a double-crested cormorant? It is one of three cormorant species found here within Washington state. They are opportunistic feeders, which means they eat a very wide variety of things, such as marine fishes, freshwater fish, crustaceans, amphibians, even insects. What makes cormorants a little bit more unique than other water birds is they have a less developed uropygial gland or preen gland. So instead of their feathers being more waterproof, they're actually more wettable. This does help them dive a lot easier, but the one downside is they have to spend a lot more time drying off in the air and the sunshine. So you see the picture on the right, they'll actually be in that pose quite often drying off. This species has been through multiple population increases and declines between the late 18 and early 1900s. More recently, in the 1970s, they were hit really hard by the DDT exposure. But starting around late 1990s, they rebounded a lot, and now they're actually considered one of the most abundant cormorant species in North America. So a little bit about Woodard Bay. It is right here in Olympia, about halfway down Henderson Inlet. It is the traditional territory of the New State Chattel peoples. It was operated by Weyerhaeuser Timber Company from around the 1920s or so to about 1987 when it was designated a conservation area. It's now managed by the Department of Natural Resources, currently 922 acres of a variety of habitats and wildlife. So this rookery or nesting site location actually holds currently about 1,700 nesting cormorants. This does include nesting great blue herons as well. And what makes this site a little bit more unique compared to other large colony nesting sites is there are folks that live directly behind the rookery itself, so the proximity to other people living around the area. So there's a lot of downsides like noise, smell, habitat destruction, like you see the trees in the photo there, or infrastructure damage to those that live around the area. These are some satellite photos of the rookery site, starting in about 2015, which is when they estimate this population really started to grow, up until most recently of this year. You can see the gradual progression from left to right about how these trees are being affected. So a lot more dead trees, and you can definitely see in quite a few the thick white guano on them. So this led me to three different research questions that I wanted to answer for this rookery. The first was, are there sufficient data on cormorants at Woodard Bay to estimate population changes between 20 and 21 and 24 and 25? What does the population look like? What are the projections for the future? Secondly was, what are the characteristics of trees used for nesting by cormorants in Woodard Bay? Do they have a preference for species, for height? What do the trees look like in the rookery area versus the trees on the outside? And then lastly, how aware of the Woodard Bay colony are local residents, and what are their opinions about it? Do these opinions change in relation to their overall proximity to it, and what other factors affect these perceptions? So do those that live closer to the rookery have more negative opinions? And what does the community think about the colony being there in general? So a lot of different methods to answer these questions, but the first for population counts, I visited Woodard Bay 21 different times this last summer. I would go to where that solid yellow dot is on the map, and I would look across the bay to where that red oval is there. That's where the rookery site is. And I would individually count birds and nests using binoculars and a tally counter. For 2024 counts, I was actually provided those by another individual who had methods similar to mine, and I was provided nest counts by him. And then I was also able to receive photographs from the Department of Fish and Wildlife for 2020 and 2021, where I was able to stitch those photographs together and individually count again birds and nests, at least for that snapshot in time. And then one quick note here, you see in the hollow orangey circle in Chapman Bay, there was actually a very small colony that was nesting there as well. But most recently, the last couple years, they have not been nesting there. It's primarily been where that red area is. Next, for the tree data, this was much more intensive of a process. Shout out to anyone who's ever done forestry work. It's really difficult. I started by using a combination of Avenza maps and Field Maps apps, as well as ArcGIS Pro to create boundary areas and polygons for both the rookery locations and outside rookery locations for comparison. I was also able to create random points, 15 for rookery and 5 for non-rookery areas, where I could then travel to that location using GPS. And once I got to that plot point, I created a 10-acre fixed radius plot. From within that plot, I analyzed any tree within that plot area. And for this study in particular, any tree is considered anything 10 centimeters diameter or greater. I also determined tree species, DBH, diameter at rest height, and also if the trees were dead or alive. If they were dead, I would also include decay class. And then for potential future forestry research as well, I wanted to include coarse woody debris data as well. I thought the best way to get the opinions of the residents that live around the area was to create a survey. So I did that through ArcGIS Survey 123. And then I also created postcards with a QR code and a URL that would take residents directly to that survey. Using USPS, I was able to select a mailing route that actually sent my postcards to 677 residences around the area. The one downside to this, it didn't include all the addresses that I really wanted to target. So I manually chose an additional 100 addresses a little bit south of Woodard Bay and on the other side of Henderson Inlet as well. So a total of 777 postcards were sent. I sent out 2 rounds of letters about 2 weeks apart, and then I officially pulled all of that data on March 8th of this year. So from all of those postcards, I did receive 106 survey responses, which is a 13.6% response rate. For my results, unfortunately, there's not a ton I can say about population counts. The data is not complete enough, so I don't have as many consecutive years in a row as I was hoping. And the count methods differ too greatly that I can accurately say the data here can estimate any kind of population changes. So not much I can get from this statistically, but the data is still there that we can at least see, it does look like there has been some growth between my counts last year compared to the photo counts that I looked at for 2020. For the tree data, there was actually a lot of different analyses that I was able to do with that. In my case, I used a level of significance of 0.05. So for anything greater than that, I considered it not significant. So in this case, DBH, there's no significance between DBH within rookery areas and non-rookery areas. And what was a little bit more surprising to me, though, is I did a chi-square test that indicated that neither dead nor alive trees were present in more areas than chance alone. So in this case, I was, I guess, expecting there might have been a lot more dead trees in the rookery areas versus the non-rookery. One note to add on this, I guess, from the data that I was able to collect this year, it may have shown very different data if I was able to collect it every year since 2015, but this is at least a snapshot from what I was able to collect for this year. But there also was some significant data as well. So I also did a chi-square test on tree species, and it was shown that tree species are present in more areas than chance alone. So in this case, the species varied from the rookery to the non-rookery locations. There was also a significance between height and plot type. So the height is different in rookery areas versus non-rookery areas. And then there is a significant association between the number of nests in a tree and the height of the tree itself. So when I was taking all of my forestry data, if there were nests in the tree, I would mark down how many nests there were. So analyzing that after the fact, I determined there was a correlation that taller trees did have more nests in them. So kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it does suggest there's a preference there. And then for the results of my survey, so I definitely had a very wide range of responses regarding this colony. A lot of people that love the cormorants and want them to stay there. Even though there were a good amount of folks that did love the colony, though, there were definitely a lot of similar concerns that I saw with all the responses. So a lot of those were impacts to the great blue herons that nest alongside them, the very visible dying trees that have been occurring over the past 10 years. And then for those that lived closer to it, stronger smells all summer long, and also potential for impact to their own health. As a general consensus, majority of the responses, they all wanted to know more about the colony. They see it there, they know it's there, but they don't know anything about it. So a lot of them suggested that they want more information about the impacts of the colony, if there are environmental benefits of it, any current studies happening, or even what the agency's intentions are with the colony for future. So that could look like updated signs at trails, newsletters for those that live around the area, and also even an updated website page for DNR. So two of the questions that I asked in my survey, one was I would support non-lethal growth control methods for this colony, or I would support lethal growth control methods for this colony. I asked all of these questions on a Likert scale. So if you see the number 3 on the color scheme here, that typically means neither agree nor disagree. One thing that is clear is that not a lot of people want lethal control methods. They don't necessarily want to see the cormorants die. But there are a lot more people on the fence when it concerns non-lethal control methods. But again, this is kind of where additional information comes into play. A lot of folks just need more info to be able to determine if a non-lethal control method is something that they want to see. Those with higher support for management plans for this rookery also had stronger negative opinions regarding the cormorants and the rookery itself, and vice versa. Those, of course, that did have more positive opinions towards the rookery had less support for any kind of management plan. So, as a summary, further research is needed to determine the full scope of impacts to other species and the environment. All the data that I was able to collect really only scratched the surface of everything that's happening at this location. So we need further studies to know impacts to other species, more vegetation, and also even water quality studies as well. To be very clear, there are no population management plans being discussed or proposed at this location by either the state or the tribes. An area that's kind of increasing in confusion for some of the residents is which state agency is actually claiming control of this colony, and also where private property rights come into play. There are federal laws that technically state you can haze large colony nesters as long as it doesn't impact the adults themselves and the young or other vulnerable bird species. So definitely a little bit more directive would be helpful from some agencies to say, this agency, this person at the agency is exactly who you should be speaking to for conflict management plans. And then also very clear guidelines to show residents, this is what the laws say, this is what you're absolutely allowed to do, and what you should not be doing. So in conclusion, careful consideration is needed to determine the best approaches for both protecting this population and reducing the conflict. So this species has a very sensitive population history, but there is conflict that does exist here. A good start would be for state agencies to educate the public about the typical ecological behaviors of these birds and other large colony nesters, like the die-offs of trees, while also providing legal and effective ways that residents can combat the negative aspects of them. Because without this discussion even occurring, without potential management plans, even for individual residents that are most greatly affected, it neither benefits the long-term survivability of this colony, nor does it benefit the livelihood of those who are having to deal with this colony increasingly over the past decade and presumably for many years more. And these are my acknowledgements. Thank you guys very much. Any questions?
And